Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Welcome everyone to this evening. We have Amanda Coster this evening. Amanda has combined her background in anthropology with photographic skills to help document the social issues around the world. She's photographed for as varied publications as Wired Magazine, Fast Company, or Newsweek, and most recently she's published her first book, Can I Come With You? Social Documentary Photography. So please help me welcome Amanda Coster.
Thank you. I'd like to keep this as informal as I can and leave as much time for questions after. But before I do that, I just want to get a sense of, are you all part of a camera club or a camera interest group, or who am I talking to tonight? Besides Joe, my friend, and another guy that I met, a friend also, another friend that came, plants in the audience. Like what's going on? Are you raise of hands or something? Are you part of a kind of group, or?
I think there's an internal mailing list. Somebody sent an email there for photography hobbies, and then so there's an internal mailing list for photographers.
Okay, so you're all photographers, and you're all loving taking pictures. A lot of people have a hard time saying they're photographers when they're not doing it for a living, but you are photographers, and you love taking pictures, and most likely travel, and. Joe's a fan. Joe's the plant. I paid Joe. Okay. So, I tend to not get super technical and gear heavy, but if you have gear questions or if you have questions that I'm not addressing when I talk, just stop me. This is really informal. I know we're in a really fancy room and everything, but just stop me because I probably won't start talking too much about gear. Not that I'm avoiding it. It's just not top on my head. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk about, I'm a professional commercial photographer. I do advertising and magazine photography, and more recently I've started doing some stock, and that's what I do for a living. But again, I'm not even going to talk much about that too. So if you have questions about that afterwards, feel free to ask questions about that part of my career as well. What I am going to talk about is how I started out as doing social documentary photography, and then how that's turned into what is now Salam Garage. And so what is social documentary photography? I call social documentary photography me going out into the world and working with international NGOs and creating photography projects and sharing that content with them based on whatever kind of agreement we come up with, and it's different for every NGO. And I come back and give photo exhibitions and share that content and hopefully raise awareness and funds for that organization as well. Does everybody know what an NGO is? Really? Does anyone want a refresher? Okay, good. I have a Wikipedia. I know that's not like the world's best source, but I couldn't find like a dictionary quickly. I did a quick search. So I have a Wikipedia definition of it in my talk, but basically Doctors Without Borders is an NGO. It stands for a non-government organization, and it's generally started, Doctors Without Borders is an enormous one, and then for every Doctors Without Borders, there's literally thousands of tiny little NGOs all around the world that basically see a problem and they're trying to fix it, they're trying to solve it, and most of them have to do with health or women's issues or poverty, disease, just issues that are, huge issues that basically the government isn't really, they feel like the government isn't doing enough or can't or doesn't have the capacity or whatever, so they're jumping in and just taking off and doing it themselves. So that's basically the way my talk is going to go. And so I'll just start with how I started. Good place to start. I studied photography after I got my degree in anthropology. I made up my own degree. My school didn't really have the degree that I wanted, so I made one up, and it was anthropology, art history, and religious studies, and this is back in Connecticut. And I wanted to study photography as well because I thought it would make me a better anthropologist. And then I ended up loving photography and realizing that I would actually be a really terrible anthropologist because I like to get involved. And I learned that anthropology is very standoff and just observation-based, and I would have done very badly. So it was a really good idea that I took a photography class. So in '93, I went to East Africa, specifically Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Kenya, with a friend of mine. She just gotten her green card. She was Ethiopian. And she said, "Do you want to come to Ethiopia with me?" I said, "Sure." And I went with her. And I took a lot of pictures on that trip, and you could say maybe like 10% of them came out, because at this point I think I had taken photo 1 or 2, and I thought I knew everything, and I knew nothing. And this was film. And I opened the back of the camera. I mean, every single mistake you can think of, I made 100 times. I dropped the camera on the floor in Kenya, broke it, was taped together with duct tape. I mean, I was a wreck, you know, and I was like, my film, I didn't really understand f-stops. I didn't understand film speeds. But a couple pictures came out, and this one came out. And so I'm going to show you some pictures from the past that for me are pretty pivotal as to why I got to where I am today. This picture mattered a lot to me and still does. It's cute, it's a cool kid, it's an Ethiopian and everything, but what I love the most about this picture is when I brought it back then I was living in Connecticut, most people asked me, "Are you sure that you were in Ethiopia?" They said, "Because this kid's not starving to death, so you couldn't have possibly been in Ethiopia or Africa, right? And he's wearing a winter jacket, so when it's hot there, and everybody's starving." And I said, "No, actually, I'm quite sure that I was in Ethiopia. I got all my vaccinations and my visa and all that. And yes, this is Ethiopia." And in that moment, I realized how powerful this photography can be. At that point, I think most people had seen pictures of Sebastião Salgado's, in fact, yes, the starving children in the grain scales during a drought that was in Ethiopia in the 80s. But that was one single event, one drought that happened in Ethiopia, and just an isolated event that is not what Ethiopia is like all the time. In fact, a lot of coffee comes from Ethiopia, and you need cold, wet, breezy, hilly conditions to grow coffee. So that was a really interesting moment for me. I had wondered in that moment how that conversation would have gone if I didn't have that picture to prove that I had actually gone to Ethiopia, to show that, in fact, no, there are cool places and not everybody is being weighed in a grain scale. This is a happy kid selling bananas to us on the side of the road. So then, you know, I think I did a lot of stuff and made a lot of mistakes and then decided to go to India. So I went to India in '97, just backpacking around. I figured out f-stops, and I kind of figured out a few more things, got my camera fixed, or probably ditched the camera and got another one, and decided that I wanted to be a black and white photographer at the time. Very, very influenced by Salgado. Does anyone know who Sebastião Salgado is? You're familiar with his work? Unfortunately, or fortunately, he is most known for those grain scales, the children being weighed in grain scales, because that was actually the first time anyone had actually really done a huge project in sub-Saharan Africa that I was aware of in photo school, and just like such an extensive project. Unfortunately, he did bring back pictures that weren't very hopeful, but he did gain a lot of fame for that particular project. And he shot all 35 millimeter black and white film, mostly Tri-X. So it's a little 400 speed, kind of grainy for those of you that remember film and love film. So this was my first time going to India, and this picture is also really important to me. It's in my book, and I don't love this picture. Actually, I really can't stand this picture, but I love to show it because I call it drive-by shootings. And the story behind this is I'm in India, and I met this. It's not me. This is a friend of mine, Danny, who I was traveling with. This is something that I hoped to never ever do again, and that was see something exotic, think it's really cool, take pictures, and just have this like ridiculous impact on that situation, and then just leave the scenario. What was happening was Danny saw this boy who is photogenic and cute and exotic, and we don't see this here in the States, and it's very appealing to photographers to take this kind of picture. And this is his grandmother. I'm pretty sure this is his grandmother. We went up and started taking his picture, and then this woman started pushing him a little bit closer to us, and So we got very excited about that, and then we started taking more pictures, and all of a sudden she said, rupees, which is the currency in India. And in that moment I was so uncomfortable, and I felt so bad. I just felt like, wow, that's not what I was trying to do here. I was just trying to take a picture, and now I've just turned this into a way for this woman to make money off her child who's scared, doesn't want to be photographed. I mean, you can see in his face, he's not happy to be there. And I took the pictures, and I do what I call the drive-by shooting. But I remember leaving there thinking really just empty and feeling like this isn't really what I set out to do with photography. And I'm really I don't support giving people money for photographs, because I just think that it changes the dynamic of what's going on with photography, and I'm not telling anybody not to, and I'm not telling anyone when they should or shouldn't, or anything's bad or good. I just have noticed the way it changes the situation, and I've noticed the energy change, and then it becomes a completely different circumstance rather than a collaboration or conversation. So I earmarked that situation, and I like to share that photo because I like people to know that I did it too. I don't think we gave the woman rupees, but I remember leaving and she was really pissed off at us. Like, everybody was mad. And we all walked away, just everybody was uncomfortable and mad, and like, that's not what we were planning to do on our trip to India. So then the rest, I traveled all over India for 2 months. I had a backpack, and just, India's gorgeous. It's an awesome place to go and photograph. It's almost a shame to photograph in black and white in a weird way, but then you actually get to notice more of the textures, like this. And if this were color, maybe you wouldn't notice this beautiful texture and this old architecture and these old alleyways and things. But anyway, this is what I call pretty pictures. I did actually find out that this was the Saraswati festival, and I think that that's the goddess of music and education. And I see some Indians in the room, and am I on the spot with that, or? Okay. And I loved doing this. I loved wandering around India, and I loved wandering into situations like this. However, when I came home, I could tell people that that was what that festival was, but I couldn't tell people who that guy was. I couldn't tell anybody what he was reading. I couldn't, I didn't really understand much. I knew that those were Bengals. I knew that those were important to the culture. But I still didn't really know much about India even after this trip. I learned what I could learn. And I'm a pretty inquisitive person. I have this anthropology background. But I felt like that this work wasn't very concrete. I didn't feel like I was actually telling any one particular story. I was working on any project. I was just showing, this is India, and, it's beautiful. It's a great place to go photograph. I didn't really know much about this fisherman, what he was catching, where did he live, how old was he, This would have been a great microfinance project, right, or a great woman business, whatever story, but But I like these photos, but they're definitely photos that I used to take. So here's your NGO definition, but I think we all got it at this point. This is for people who really have never heard of it, which is great, because now they get to learn. So then I realized, all right, I've got these pretty pictures. I'm hanging them on the wall. People are asking me questions. What's that festival? I have no idea. All I know is that that's the goddess of those particular things. I don't really even remember when. Does that happen all the time in India at that time? Or, I don't know. Pre-internet, no clue, And so then I had this opportunity to go down to Brazil. And so I took it. And I knew that, again, I could show up in a place and just take pictures and, take really great pictures. Once again, exotic location, could take pictures. People could go ooh and ah. I could be very cool. I could be this, Indiana Jones photographer. But that's not what I wanted anymore. And so at this point, my magazine career was taking off a lot. And I knew a lot of different editors, and I was in New York. And so a friend of mine, an editor, knew an editor, and he said, I know somebody at Doctors Without Borders. So I went into the office, I showed them my India pictures, and I said, I'd like to go, but I'm going to Brazil, and I'd like to work with you on a project. Do you need anything covered? Do you need pictures of anything? Is there anything you're trying to, tell a story? Is there anything you need the word to get out more, whatever? So yes, there was, of course. And it was a pre and a postnatal health facility. in Rio de Janeiro in the favelas, which are the slums. So an underserved community that Doctors Without Borders went into and was serving the people in this particular community. Normally, you don't go into favelas at all. I don't know if anyone's ever seen City of God, but it's an amazing movie, and it's about the favelas of Rio. They're not very safe, and which is unfortunate. But the deal with favelas is they're run by drug dealers, and lots of money and lots of drug dealers and guns are basically the main product of a favela. So there's a lot of money going in and out of favelas, and the government doesn't even want to bother. So they're pretty much run by the drug dealers. And so drug dealers really have absolutely no interest in being photographed, much less having their picture being published in any kind of newspaper. So I was told, and I learned my two amazing takeaways from this experience was, I'll stop on this picture, was I'm not coordinated enough to go through and push the button and tell the story and all that, so I have to stop. My two biggest takeaways from this project was, three. One was that I actually learned her name was Anna, and I learned that that was her when she was a kid, and I learned that she lived with her grandmother, and I learned the house that she lived in was built by Doctors Without Borders under a deal where they promised not to sell or rent the house. They had to live in the house, and then they could have the house for free. And I learned, I interviewed her, and I got to learn all kinds of stuff about her and her brother and her grandmother and her mom and what her mom was doing for work, and Dad was out of the picture. And I learned a lot about this one girl because I actually stayed in one place. I had translators. I hooked up with an organization, and I took the time to actually make that happen. And in the past, in India, I was just running around taking pictures of, and I think that's just a natural progression for anybody in their career. You first get really excited about the medium, and then figure out how you can take that medium to another level. So that was a great takeaway, just having that experience with her, having the translator, having a car, having a driver, having it organized, and being okay to be there. Another one was I learned to walk into a situation with my camera around my neck and not take pictures, and just walk in and say, hey, Artworld, this is all through a translator. I'm a photographer, but I really want to get to know who you are yet before I actually start snapping my pictures. And I want to find out what's okay and what's not okay for me to photograph. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? Are you, is it okay for me to show where you live? Is it not okay for me to, because a lot of people don't want them to see, even here in this country, they just don't want to be associated with their house because they might have stuff going on. And in case that picture ends up somewhere, people will know that they live there. So if people were drug dealers or prostitutes or just not really wanting to have too much information out there, they had the opportunity to tell me that kind of thing in that scenario by not taking pictures first. So that was one thing. And the second, I learned how valuable it was to be working with the team. It was super valuable to be working with a team, a local in-country team with native people, with Brazilians, not just for the advantage of the language, but for the advantage of understanding the culture and understanding the protocol. It's hugely important, and anything that I ever do now, I don't ever just go in with a crew. I always hire local people, as many as I can, and hopefully women, to try and get a sense of the protocol, get a sense of the culture, where to eat, everything, where's the really great local food, that kind of stuff. So those are two of the takeaways. The most important from this was to walk into a scenario and not take pictures, to actually introduce some people, tell them my name, show them pictures of my family, show them pictures of a little bit of me, so it wasn't all I'm taking stuff from you and I'm not giving you anything. So these are the photos. That's her brother, and I learned a lot about their family, and I hung out, and you can see the intimacy on this compared to the India pictures. I mean, there's just such an intimacy. I'm so much closer. This is they do house, what is it called, house calls as well. So then fast forward to 2004, I started doing some local projects in town, and then it was time for me, I had an opportunity to go to Kenya and do another international documentary project. I was teaching photojournalism in Kenya, and then went to another NGO to work with them I think probably, Joe, you remember one. You might remember when I went there. Joe, I've known Joe for the longest out of everyone in the room. Anyway, so I worked with this very small, this is an example of a very small NGO called Doctors Without Borders, Rabor Village Project, which is founded by a woman named Lois Mobewa, who is from Rabor. Rabor is the name of the village. And she's here in Seattle going to UW, getting her master's in international health. Forgive me, I forgot how to save the world. I don't know what the degree is called, but that's what she's going to do. And so I met her through a friend, and I was in Kenya, already living there, doing another project. And she said, well, we can't afford to fly you all the way to Kenya, but since you're already there, could you go over from east to west Kenya and take pictures of our organization so we can use it for our brochures and website and all that? They had just gotten started, and they didn't have any kind of images or story out there about their work. And I said no and yes. I said, no, I am not going to your organization and just shooting it and taking off. And I said, yes, I will do it, but I have an idea. And what I want to do is let's identify like 5 or 6 people that represent the different kinds of people that you're trying to serve. Like, let's say AIDS orphans or widows or widowers or just extreme poverty. Like, what are the issues and who is really who's tackling those issues that you're helping serve, that is willing to, in advance, agree to being photographed, interviewed, and tell their story rather than me showing up and us just like going after people. I felt really strongly about that. I felt super strong about having these individuals identified far in advance. So late night phone calls because of the time zone difference and all that stuff. We're calling Kenya, dropped calls, you name it, 2 a.m. We're sitting there on the phone, and finally we got our list of like 6 people that were willing to work with us. And Caxton was one of them, and his brothers and sisters who are behind him. Caxton's 15 years old, and at the time, and an orphan. His everybody older than him in his family died of HIV/AIDS, one related diseases. And here he is waking up, and that's his brother Peter, and that's their house behind him. And that's Millicent, who is a widow who lost her husband, and who, is this Mike? Yeah. Who lost her husband and a daughter who was born infected. And she runs a small business out of her house. And I mean, I can tell you all kinds of stuff about Millicent. I could sit down and talk to you about Millicent for half an hour. And I did talk with her for a long. I spent a lot of time. Unfortunately, I can't remember this guy's name, but I have it written down. And this is his family. And he's a widower, and he lost his wife. And this is an ironic picture that there's a black space, but that's the way they stood. And that's their family, and that's their dad, and they love their dad a lot. And I can tell you all kinds of stories about them if you want to hear them. And she's 18 years old. Can't remember her name either. I have it written down. Telling me her story about being 18 and terrified of what to do about a husband and a family, because that's the tradition there. You get married and you have children, and she knows that it's a 33% infection rate in that village. This moment, the chief of the village who I was working with said, "How many of you are orphans? Stand up if you're an orphan." And that was his idea. He really wanted to bring it home. How many kids were orphans in the village? I didn't feel very comfortable about that, but that's what he did. And then he leaned over and he said, "Amanda, not everybody's standing." It's one of the highest infection rates in the world, is in this area of Africa, of Kenya. And so this is a video. This is Caxton's story. I wonder if you can turn the lights down a little bit. Cool. Thank you.
My name is Caxton Odhiambo. Ajay apar ngwen.
It's 14 years.
I went to Chulembo Primary School. Wadi puodho. Min mathin ni en odong ka loso dierot. Oloko sende. Pagi moro nitie mi wamadho kwa dhi school. To loso to wamadho to wadhi school. To ka onge to oloko loho gigo to wan kwase puodho to wabiro. Wayudo koseketo nwa pi kata to walokore go to wadhi school. Kwase puodho kinyi to wadhi school. Koro kwa duogo ka saa biro gimoro nitie minyalo chamo to wachamo, to ka onge to modho pi to wadok. To koro mo godhiambo to kos nitie puothe moko monego mwakawoga. Koro wadhi to wapuro to dipo ka jogo miwa kata oduma moro kata mar ariyo kata achiel to wabiro to warego to mwachamo. Koro mo godhiambo to wadhi. Koro mo chieng' ngeso awuok okinyi to adhi atiyo negi to gimiya pesa. Tabiro to wariwo kamoro achiel to wanyiewo go oduma gi chiemo to wachamo. Kamano. Gik mowacho ka winj maber.
Yani.
En mana no ka temo onyalo konyo.
What is it that keeps you going? That gives you hope to keep going?
Gima michuna mondo miya atim matek kamano mondo miya kony nyithindwa gi. Kamano. Nyalo wachonu ni ubiro mondo konyo. Koro kaponi wanyalo yudo ngima moro maber, anyalo mako skul matek. Koro ok mi kata koro awuogi kata koro adhi gone ji amalo. Asomo matek. Ndo chieng' moro abe oneno.
Aido gari tera we got tera de anekisumo Tokaido tera kisumo tera de anekisumo Aido meli tera winam tera de anekisumo Boda soya kondele tera de anekisumo Anna duaro kenda onge ngama tera Anna duaro kenda onge ngama tera Binidong jadala binidong Binidong jatelo binidong Binidong osyepna binidong Binidong jaturwa binidong Binidong jadala.
So that is Caxton telling his own story with music from his own village, with a translator, Lois Mabewa, who is from that village, which is all really important to me. It was important to me that all of that stuff stayed within that place. I didn't pull music from West Africa. I didn't get a translator from UW, and I didn't, whatever. That's really important to me. And what's super important to me that is what he said is that I just want to be seen as somebody who exists, and I thank Becky so much for reminding me to state that, because that is pretty much, I think, why I do what I do, because I hear that every place I go in the world. Everywhere I've gone, everybody says the same thing. They just feel like nobody knows they're alive. Nobody thinks that anybody cares. That God forgot about them, and all kinds of stuff. And every time I hear that, it makes me want to work 100 times harder, because I know people do care. And I promised Caxton that people would know who he is, and he's on the cover of my book. And I mean, like, how grateful am I, for him sharing his story with me, and trusting me and with my cameras, and, basically, why don't I just drive up in a Rolls Royce, and opening up to this woman and telling his story. For a child to admit to being an orphan, A, and B, to talk about it openly is an enormous, enormous thing, because the stigma attached to it is pretty horrific and can really, kick that kid out of the community really far. And I think that he just had it. I think that he really trusted me somehow, or trusted the people that brought me anyway. And I'm super grateful for that. And stuff like that keeps me working as hard as I possibly can. And so anyway, so on to the next level of my career. So, I came back, and so what I would do with that is I would exhibit the work with the NGO, which is, part of it is here in Seattle. So I had this team of this production team. Basically, we could hang the work up, have an opening, and then there could be a talk where people could talk about the NGO, and then we could raise money. And now Caxton's all set. He and his whole family, they have, the house has been fixed, and definitely not only because of me. I mean, the NGO is doing way more work than I am on a daily basis. But he's going to school forever. He's done. He doesn't have to worry anymore. So then I came back, and so kind of now take a left turn, and back in my office discovering social media. So now I'm discovering at this time it was MySpace, which I don't really like anymore because I like Facebook better. But I liked MySpace a lot back then because Facebook didn't come out. And I was like, wow, look at this. This is a really cool place where I can put up all my work and I can get the word out there even more about Caxton or any of the other projects that I've done. And that's not my picture, but I thought, even a better, I don't care about what I look like. Get pictures of other people out there and the work that I've done. And of course, a lot of people think that's me, and I get really interesting emails like, hey, African sister. I'm like, no, I'm not. But whatever, it doesn't have anything to do with me really. But so I discovered this, and I discovered this as a way to get work out there even more. It's not easy to get a gallery show. It's not easy. Magazines are disappearing. Print media is disappearing. Advertising space is bigger than photo essays nowadays. So, all of us media makers are dealing with that. But this stuff is showing up now, like Facebook and, Flickr and all this. And I thought, wow, this is great. This is a great way to get work out there, make friends, connect different people, get things connected. And it worked. I got all these friends, and, work ended up on videos whatever. So this is one of my interns that got me into this, because I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, MySpace. And so he set it up, and it just got me thinking. And it got me thinking, okay, so then I started looking around MySpace, and I started seeing this content that was kind of not that, in my opinion, not that important and not that effective. People dancing around their underwear is my favorite example, or popping, cell phones popping popcorn or whatever. You guys have all seen how many videos on YouTube. Okay, so that content is there, but there's also a platform to plug in all your content that's actually going to make a difference, and that's a possibility too. So that's kind of what I was focusing on. And so now a lot of things were happening in my career. It's starting to gain more recognition. My career is starting to do very well. And all these people now started asking me, can I come with you on these trips? And so I thought, well, geez, all these people keep asking me to come on these trips. Why don't I just make one, Because it doesn't make sense for me to be there with Caxton and have this, all of you behind me, let me get a different shot. I was like, come on, that's never going to, I'd never get that video. He'd never open up, and it would never be that intimate. But what if I created a trip where all of you guys went on a trip, and I worked with the NGO, and I came up with different projects, and you all worked together, and then you guys made your own projects. And then we brought them back here, and we plugged it into all these Facebooks and all that stuff, and tried to have shows at galleries and all that. Then what would happen? So, now all these things are starting to come together. So then I created Salaam Garage. Supposed to laugh, but okay. So I created Salaam Garage, and so what I did was I led a trip in 2007 to India, and I worked with an NGO called Vatsalya that gets children off the streets, street kids off the streets, into an orphanage and teaches them, there's a school for them, they're fed, and there's vocational training, and there's job training and all that. So I had these connections in India. It all came together. I created this trip. I found a couple different NGOs. I went to India in advance, and I said, let me look at some of the NGOs. Vatsalya made the most sense, needed to have a web presence so that people from wherever could take a look at the web presence and see where they were going, do some research and all that. So I led the trip, and to some very, very brave guinea pigs. And here they are. Here's their names. And that's what we did. In 2007, we went to Vatsalya, which is in Jaipur, and then we went around Rajasthan. just a little part of India. I didn't want to do what I had done and like take people all over India. I thought that was ridiculous. I thought, let's just stay in one little centralized place and get to know it as much as we possibly can. So, I hired local people to work with. I had a friend of a friend whose family had a hotel there, so that helped out a lot. And these were the 4 very brave guinea pigs that went on the first trip. The 5th woman didn't make it because she didn't realize that you need to have a visa. So that's a great lesson. I mean, and she's a very intelligent woman. And some Americans, first of all, what is it, like 23% of Americans have passports anyway, and I think that's even less than Congress. But she didn't know, she just thought you could go anywhere you wanted to go. And like, I'm sure she'll never make, who hasn't made a really silly mistake? I've certainly made all of them. Haven't made that one, but I made a lot of other ones. But I mean, it's amazing what shows up when you start leading trips like this. For everybody, for me too. So here's, So not only do we go to the NGO, but we did really cool stuff. Like, I see everybody as part of it. Our driver was part of it. Our chef was part of it. Every single person was part of what we were doing. So we would chat with our driver, who was hilarious. And I tried to give him an example of what I wanted to do on the trip. And he's like, well, do you want to see some dancing? He said, yeah, we'll take you to this big show. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to a big show. I want to go someplace small. Can we go to school or, someplace where, like a school would be great. We did go to a school where you can actually go and here's these kids that want to learn music and give them a tip, rather than this huge, plenty of people are going to see the big show. But then you get to see these kids who are like hungry musicians that are trying and practicing and are so passionate still. So we did stuff like this. And this was Govind's, I think it's Govind's sisters, cousins, aunts, something. It's a big family, and I couldn't quite get what the connection was. But this is part of his family. We just went over their house and hung out and then like drank chai. And this is Rajasthani. Is anyone from Rajasthan here? No? Okay. Apparently she's a really good dancer, and we were all mesmerized. So this is Linda in the back, who's one of the women that went on the trips. Don't miss the kids in the back. So, that's the kind of stuff. I led the trip, like that's how I travel, so I wanted to lead a trip, the kind of trip that I would want to go on. And this is just traffic. We ended up going to see the Maharaja of Rajasthan, which was totally random, but we did. And this was us rushing to see him, meet him.
I think on these kind of quick darts, I don't recommend the front seat for those weak of stomach. Yeah, and all of you that are feeling a little wobbly, stick to the
That
back.
was Govind, our driver, his hand.
I'm digging it, but
So, it's definitely not leading a 5-star trip. Not interested in doing that. There's plenty of those trips out there. This is the NGO we worked with. You can see it's pretty, judging by the website, if you want to judge, it's pretty grassroots. It's not very high tech, and it's founded by a Indian couple who are very well educated, have very high degrees, and have just decided to stay in Jaipur and work on street kids. Like, do the best they can to get them off the street and into this. And just with faith, because they don't really know how they're going to fund the whole thing for the rest of their career and all that, but they just really feel like that's what they need to do. Amazing, amazing couple. They could be working anywhere in the world, and they chose to do that. And they're so cool. I wish they were here. So that's Vatsalya. And there's Jamala. She's the woman that founded the organization. And here's the photos that the group made from the NGO. So these were all children living on the streets, and now they're learning carpentry and baking. There's a lot of tourism in Jaipur, which is the city right nearby, so it makes sense that they would learn something that would help with that business and sewing and just practical things. And dance was a big part of the NGO as well. to help the girls and the boys to start to express themselves again. And then the group had their first exhibition, and this woman from NPR showed up, and a lot of people showed up. And for 3 out of 4 of them, it was their very first photo exhibition. And basically, what I did was I had a regular February slot in a cafe, and I said, why don't you guys just take my slot? And so they hung their show. That was February this year, and the show has not hit the ground yet. As far as I know, the show is in demand. Because something I hadn't expected was the galleries, the cafes, whoever, feel that they're also helping because they're offering up their walls to possibly help out the kids in Vatsalya. And from that one little cafe gallery show, Vatsalya got hooked up with the Microsoft Giving, whatever it's called. So if an employee gives $1, the Microsoft matches it. It's from that one coffee shop, hole in the wall in Ballard. They're now in that part of that program. And a lot of salaries and a lot of bicycles were bought after that one exhibition. So then, so now everything's going a little bit nuts, right? So the PI found out about it, and they interviewed everybody that went and published their work. And, and I was having conversation and conscious choice and different things, and things I didn't expect to happen were anybody that gets involved with it, journalists, gallery owners, coffee shops. I hadn't expected that those folks would also feel like they were helping. I just hadn't anticipated that. I hadn't anticipated the journalist sitting down with me saying, God, I'm so glad I'm writing this story instead of Little Freddie's dog, blah, 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 or the monorail. I'm so glad that I can tell this story. And you don't know how refreshing and inspiring this is for me. And I just hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected any of this. It was a crazy idea. It was actually a way for people to stop asking me, can I come with you? So then now I'm getting invited to speak at all of these high-tech conferences, which I hadn't expected, because I saw all this social media stuff going on. I saw Flickr and all this, and once I figured out how to make it work, and the group started figuring out how to make it work, I thought, guys, let's put all your images on Flickr and then put the caption and have the caption lead back to Vatsalya and tag it with India, children, whatever it is, and then it gets found, and then people get to read, and then so all of a sudden, all of this stuff is available, all this real media, all this honest media is available. And then somebody made a video on YouTube, so she took her pictures and combined them with some other pictures and did something with this organization called Shy. And so now she's founded her own, the DC Traveler, she founded her own little branch of this NGO in DC, and she's working with the Indian Embassy to hang her photos there from Vatsalya. And these are just examples of how this is. I don't even know anymore where all this goes. And then one guy, Conrad, made this website with all this information, all these images, how you can help, all this stuff. And it's on his website, and he writes and makes books for Adobe Photoshop. And now he's allowed to use his photos in these books, and now he's putting his photos from Vatsalya in the Photoshop books. And then a publisher came to me and said, I'd love to make a book of your work. And so now there's this book, and what do you want to call it? I said, I can't think of any other title because this changed everything for me. So I called it Can I Come With You? And the books are in the back, and a little commercial, they're for sale, and I'll sign them. So, then I spoke at GnomeDex, which is this big geek tech conference, and I said, please don't invite me to speak at this. It doesn't make any sense. And I got on stage, and I said, I don't even know why I'm here. I'm not, you guys are all making Facebook and software and all this stuff, and I'm a photographer, but they wanted me to come up here and talk about Salam Garage. And I ended up being one of the top 3 speakers at it, and now I was invited to speak at Web 2.0, and I spoke at the Microsoft Social Computing SCS, Social Computing Symposium. And this is how I met Anna. Anne, sorry. I'm a little nervous when and we found each other on Twitter. So we were twittering each other from, did you go to the GnomeDex? I didn't. But you went to the Social Computing Symposium, and you Twittered, and I saw your Twitter, and I connected you on, and I just learned about Twitter. You know, I'm like the last person you would expect to be using Twitter, and I saw that she was at the conference, and I was like, oh, well, let's connect, and then we met, and now this happened, and so, I mean, it's just really funny the way all of this, what can happen with all this social media. It's amazing. It's like almost this invisible, what do they call it, like air? Like it's like this invisible stuff that's going on everywhere. You don't even see it anymore, but things are connecting and things are happening. And so my vision was to plug all of this intentional content into all the social media and have all that circulating all around and have people know about Caxton and have people know about Vatsalya's and not have it be so far away, you know, have it be like right in this room. And so these are the upcoming trips. We're doing Vatsalya again, Guatemala. These are on the salamgarage.com, and these itineraries are pretty much all set. This one is not. That's going to be the first. We got a special permission, invitation, delegation from the Vietnam government. It's the first group of photographers that are able to go into the Quang Tri province since the war and openly photograph, which I think is, you know, it's sort of central, so it's where a lot of battle went on. And their focus is landmines. So there's a lot of people dealing with leftover war. And I love this quote. Definitely big inspiration of all of ours. So that's my talk. That's it. Okay, bring on the gear questions. I'm ready. Does anyone have any questions?
What made you go into anthropology?
Excuse me?
What made you go into anthropology?
You know, that's an awesome question. I was lucky enough to be born and be brought up in an environment that my parents had lived in around the world, and I was born in Switzerland, and I was lucky enough to be brought up with a couple different languages and art from around the world and conversation from around the world. So I was always always thought of myself as living in the world, not as living in Connecticut or whatever. I always thought that I was just part of this world. And so I wanted a career that would keep me in that mindset, that would keep me in that way. And I was always really curious about the rest of the world and people, and it just made sense. You know when something resonates and you don't even quite know why? Like physics did not resonate with me. And algebra did definitely not. Algebra 1, sure. Algebra 2, didn't care. You know? It's just something, I can give you all these reasons, like I said, my family, my parents, but it's all BS. It's like, it just resonated.
I used to be an archaeologist myself.
Ah.
I see the anthropologist in you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I feel lucky that I didn't have to leave, you know, that for my life, for my earning a living and all that. Thanks.
When you take a picture, do you ask the people to pose for you?
Never. Never.
Visual lines when you take a picture? Flash lights or?
In these pictures, no. So I said never to my social documentary work. My commercial work, not so often. Because I get hired now to shoot like that. Like art directors and all that want that in their want that in Forbes somehow, which isn't so easy, especially on this campus. But there's a lot of cubicles. It's hard to, you know, it's hard and so awesome to make something of nothing, you know. But in my commercial work, absolutely. Like if you go to amandacoster.com, there are lights, strobes, everything. Like, you know, I'm using strobes and lights and flashes and stuff like that. But this, no.
Which one do you like more, commercial or?
Oh. I wouldn't do any commercial. I actually love the commercial because I like the business side of it. I think that's really fun. It's an interesting puzzle. There's something I forgot to mention. But if I could, I would just do probably stock. Well, see, if I could just get my mind out of all that, I would just work on Salam Garage. That's all I would do. I wouldn't bother with the commercial. And something that's really interesting that I forgot to mention that's going on now is Salam Garage as a result of all of this energy, I'm meeting with RIT this month to Rochester Institute of Technology. They've got this online publishing platform that they want to take a whole class of theirs. They have this open publishing department. I think that's what it's called, but they have this one particular thing that they want to create that's going to be open source, that they want to take a whole class down. And they're thinking about Guatemala and just fill up the class and the faculty in Guatemala, the whole trip, like fill up the whole trip with their group, and then create all that content and plug it into this platform that they've got that is like instantaneous publishing, not only online, but like you press play basically somewhere and it prints out a high-res PDF so you can actually distribute. So what they want to do is A, bring the class down, and B, work with that content back at RIT and then get involved with the NGO as well. So because you can see all the different departments that could get involved with a project like this. And the other thing is I am talking with corporations. I don't know if I can see, but there's a gentleman in this room that I've had a couple meetings with. And also with IBM, because there's a lot going on. I mean, obviously, like content, you can apply content to pretty much anything these days, and I'm standing in software land, right? So you can just imagine what can be done with this content. So if you think about, okay, we're creating content, we're creating software, we're creating some kind of application. We need to plug content into it to make it work, to do something with it. Why not plug in content that's actually going to content that doesn't just go nowhere, like, oh, we're red because it's so red, or, how red can this flower be? But, hey, what about a kid in India, What about if we took that content as far as we possibly could and gave it as much life as we could? And there's some, this is very soon, this just happened as a result of these conferences, but there's corporations that are like, well, yeah. And then, there's corporate responsibility departments out there, and there's content creation, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. I had not thought any of this was going to happen. I really didn't. But I'm really psyched that it is. I wanted to say that too.
Can you talk some about sort of the agreements that you have with the organ? Do you just go and then send them all your film, or kind of how does it work at a practical level?
So I deal with the NGO far in advance. I'm part of and there's a couple of people working with me now. What Salam Garage does is we work with the NGO. It needs to be an NGO that makes sense. Like there absolutely has to be a web presence so people can see where they're going and read up on it and really feel comfortable with that they're going to a legitimate place. It has to make sense for the NGO, with their capacity for us to be there. In some cases, from the trip fees, I actually use some of that to pay the additional, pay the staff for additional time, or definitely hire translators and all that. But all of these NGOs are working on a shoestring, so it does require additional capacity. So we need to make sure that even with the money that I can pay, that it makes sense. So then they come up with the story ideas. So basically, I work with them in advance. We come up with project ideas, let's say 10. And usually it's a maximum of 12 people that go on a trip. And I have them team up because A, it's great to work in a team, there's accountability, all that stuff. So let's say we come up with 10 projects. The NGO comes up with all those projects. I don't come up with any project ideas. I don't think I have any place doing that. So that's their opportunity to tell their story, whatever they want to tell. And then, so we show up, and then we work in the NGO about half the time of the trip, and the other half we spend just touring around the region just lightly. And so then while we're there, we work on these projects, and they go off into teams, and they have translators, they have whatever they need to do the projects that they need to do based on the way I've done my projects. And then, now with dealing with corporations and dealing with funded trips, we need to sit down and talk about what do we do with that content. Absolutely, I don't promise any content. It's not mine to give away. I would never do that. And I'm really, really, really adamant about that. And that's the biggest thing. The NGOs are like, well, can't you? And I'm like, no, And I'm a member of ASMP, which is a professional photographers group. So I offer and have available a lot of different licensing agreements that people can have with their content. People need to be prepared that the NGOs don't have the budget to pay them a usage fee, but at least sign an agreement so that it's official and people understand the value in the content and understand that content isn't to be given away, and have that conversation. So that's the way that works. and then obviously they own the copyright, so they go home and do whatever they wish to do with the content. Does that answer your question? That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. Yes?
With the name Salam Garage.
I knew that. Yay! I know it's a funky name. When I went on that trip to Ethiopia, my friend Sanait, she's Ethiopian, she came a little bit, actually we went to Asmara first, to Eritrea. She came later because of stuff, and so I went a week alone in advance. And so they gave me directions, get off the plane, get your bags, and here are these directions to Grandma's house, right? And I really, boy, do I wish I had this paper, but that was so long ago. It was in Tigrinya, which is another alphabet, which, no idea, upside down, backwards, no clue, right? But I knew, because of the steno and the way I ripped it off, that was the top. And so I handed that to the cab driver, and I said, this is where I need to go, and he took it, and he tried so hard, bless this poor guy. But, assumption number one, like I told this gentleman, that everyone can read, I mean, does this cab driver really need to read? Not necessarily. He's probably grew up in Asmara and knows the roads, knows more than, any of the city officials, right? So I don't think he could A, read, or B, read the handwriting, because he was lost. We were lost for a long time, and it was the coolest being lost moment of my whole life. But after a while, I was ready to get to Grandma's house. So the guy gave me the thing back, and I'm sure he said, lady, I don't know what to do with you. Really, I don't know where to drop you off, right? Like, a war had just ended 4 months ago, so there were no tourists. So on the paper was all this Tigrinya, and then Salam Garage was written in English. And so I said to him, Salam Garage, and Grandma lived next to this car shop called Salam Garage, and I saw the sign, and it just stuck with me. Like I was saying before, I have a friend who's a copywriter. We were trying to come up with a name for Salam Garage, and we had these really cool names, or he thought they were really cool, and I thought they were kind of cheesy, these acronyms that made total sense, and it just didn't fit me, and the Salam Garage has always stuck with me, so I just said, forget it, I'll keep it. So that's the name. Thanks for asking. Everybody wonders. Oh. Where are the gear questions? Come on.
Canon or Nikon?
Yay! Actually, most of what you saw was Hasselblad, which was film. And I just switched 100 totally to digital last year. I'm really a stickler for things being... A lot of other things in my life are totally haphazard, but when it comes to quality of an image, I just didn't think that digital was where it needed to be for me until last year, till I found the D5. So now I'm shooting with the Canon D5, and I terribly miss my Hasselblad because I love square, and I just love the whole thing. I love how it's old and cranky or whatever. Crankety? I can't think of the word. Clunky. But anyway, so now it's all Canon, and video's Canon, the point and shoot's Canon, all that. One lens, I use just what do I use? I think it's like a 24 to 100 or something like that. What is it? 24-105. 24-105. And with the Hasselblad, I only used the 80. I just couldn't deal with a lot of lenses. I don't like having a ton of choices all at once. I end up being overwhelmed. And the way I was taught photography was very, very old school, very puritanical. Like, we were not allowed to have any zoom cameras. We were not allowed to have any automatic cameras, anything. If you showed up with an automatic camera, you got kicked out of class. And I'm really grateful for that, because it was like, do you learn on a standard or do you learn on an automatic car? Like, learn on a standard, because then you understand how to drive. I feel like that's a good analogy for me. Like, on an automatic car, things are happening and I don't have any control, but in a standard, I can make it go the way I want, and the same with photography. I mean, all of my cameras, they have so many settings, and I never use any of them. Like, it's always on manual, maybe on aperture priority nowadays, because that matters more to me than the other stuff. But that's it, and I don't know what any of the other stuff does. No idea.
Where do you see yourself going with Salam Garage?
I see Salam Garage having you know, as many trips as that makes sense. Like, I'm not interested in having lots of trips a year. I mean, I definitely see myself bringing on more tour guides, more team. I like something else that I hadn't expected to have happen with Salam Garage is that other documentary photographer, I remember what it was like all that stuff I did was either self-funded grants, fundraisers, or credit cards, you know, starting from the beginning of my career. And I know what it's like to want desperately to do a project and not have the funds. I mean, back then was film too. So what I like about it is that other photographers can come, lead the trip with me, and then they get to stick around and potentially do their own projects. So they're paid. Their trip is paid, and so they actually have an opportunity to be there, which is the hugest expense in doing all these projects. I see myself having more help with the little stuff I don't like doing, but I do see my bigger vision is more collaborations with universities and corporations. I'd see that, like I saw that right from the start, really, because it seemed to make sense. I see there's content, right? So all that content can be created into a whole bunch of different stuff. I see publications, you know. I see other stuff that I might not mention, you know, but there's a lot of stuff because it's so wacky that...
Do you have like a specific goal in mind, or basically you go wherever the wind takes you?
That's kind of how I live my life. All of a sudden I'm going to be very structured. No, you know, I like to keep the trips geographically and subject diverse. So I could do women's microfinance all over, anywhere, anytime, because that's really happening all over the world right now. I'd like to keep the geography diverse so that people have opportunities to see different places, and the issues to be diverse, the subject matter, the projects to be diverse. I'm also pretty realistic that, you know, I can really only manage so much at once, and I have no interest in like this enormous scale next year. I don't see that that's happening. So I'm really just trying to do a couple of things really, really well and take it from there. So
in terms of content, do you have like any particular goals, or is there a specific theme that you are attracted to that you want to develop, or?
What do you mean for Salam Garage, or do you mean for a personal project?
Both.
Oh.
Whatever, both.
Because Salam Garage is the people who go there and do the content, not...
Right, I don't make the content on Salam Garage, but you know that, right? It's the trip, the people. Do you have something in mind right now that you're trying to lead me to?
No.
Okay.
I'm just discovering social documentaries. So.
Oh, okay. I mean, the content that's created isn't mine, you know, so I don't really feel like I can come up with a vision for other people's content. I kind of can, like, because I can see how that content has an impact on other people, and I can help the content creators get that content to a place where it might have the most impact. I can help that by leveraging my career. Basically, what Salam Garage is me leveraging my career to expand on my own personal vision as to how stories can change lives. Do I have an ultimate vision? I mean, sure, I see books, and I see maybe a magazine, and I see more collaborations with corporations, like I said. I see more trips. I mean, it could go in so many different directions. But I'm also really careful to stay out of fantasy world and like stay really practical, you know. I had not expected this to happen. I mean, it's been 1 year, and all of what you just saw was 1 year. That's it. And, you know, 1 year with me in my full-time career. So, you know, what do you see?
I'm just in the discovery mode, so that's why.
Do you see, I mean, something I haven't said? I'm not suspicious. I'm just actually curious. I love to hear other people's ideas, you know. I just want to be I want to do a couple things really well in the beginning, you know. I see a lot of people with ideas going crazy and then forgetting all about, you know, what got it there in the first place. And I mean, I have been successful with my career in staying very focused and practical and yet taking a lot of risks. So probably that's what I'll do with Salam Garage as well, because that's just pretty much the way I operate. And I know that opportunity is going to show up. Like, I had no idea I would end up at these conferences. And now I'm getting invited to speak at more of these conferences. So, and the funniest thing is that I was coined, what was I coined at Gnome Deck? Human 2.0, where it's like, I know, like we have, you know, Web 1.0, 2.0 and all that, but like, so now we're at this point, right? So we've pretty much mastered, you know, getting content in places. Like, it's pretty easy. Like, if you can't figure out how to do it now, wow. But now what do we do with that content, you know? Here we are, like, everybody in this room, or I feel like I could safely say half the people in this room are trying to rally an audience right now with their blog, with their Flickr, with whatever it is. So and that didn't used to happen. Now there is the possibility to create independent media and to disseminate independent media easily in our community, not around the world, but we can do that. We have access. Look at all the stuff in this room, And why can't all of that be harnessed in a positive way, in a way to help other people? Like, well, I don't see why I can't. And I know that everybody has that in them. So, and I think that that's why so far this has been so successful, because everybody that gets involved feels that it's a win-win, and I'm the first person to say when I made a mistake. I have no interest, because it's like I already have my day job. This is a wacky experience. I get to meet really cool people, So really, I just try and stay very practical with it. So, any other questions? We still have time. Wow. Yes.
Do you incorporate any of the women's issues that you were working on previously in any type of this? Or would you see that as maybe a subject of a Salam Garage topic in the future?
Like specifically a women's issue? My old, yeah. There's a whole different project that I didn't show, which is a women's body issue project. I think that shows up in my work everywhere. I think that the first trip you saw with Vatsalya was absolutely an experiment. Like, it was absolutely not focused. We showed up and we explored the NGO, and I learned on that trip, let's have story ideas, let's have more projects, and let's stay here longer. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes on that trip. I did a lot of things really well. I learned how I would do it differently. So I think incorporating my women's issues or my women's, subject matter focus, absolutely. Like, if you pick up the India trip, we actually have story ideas picked out already, and you'll see a lot of the different women's projects going on within that. So then people on the Salam Garage trip can choose that story. And there's no question that that's going to show up in everything I do. I mean, that's going to show up. I've seen it everywhere in the world. If women were educated and were given a bigger piece of the pie, or were empowered in their own culturally, like, in a way that makes sense in that particular culture, right? Like, don't turn every woman into American woman. It doesn't make sense. I think that would have a insane impact on this planet. And there's no question that's behind a lot of the stuff I do. Is it the only thing? No, there's children. I don't understand why there's children living on the streets at all when I'm standing in a room like this. I don't get it. So you can see where I'm coming from. Like, when I see Caxton speak, like, it just makes me work harder. Like, what doesn't make any sense to me that's happening. But it's happening, and, I feel like I'm doing my little tiny part by, telling you about Caxton. He's not, he hasn't given up hope. The dude is out there every single day in the farm. He's done not given up at all. And one of the things that that is a major focus of Salam Garage is to not bring back these pathetic stories, of like hopelessness and like kids in grain scales. Like, what? That just makes more of that. I want to bring back stories of kids that are trying, people that are trying, stuff that's actually going on that's inspiring. Because there's a lot of that going on in this world. It doesn't get enough attention. There's so much of that. It's like women, Jamala, Lois Mabewa, the woman that founded the NGO here, and Jamala, the woman in India, these women are all over the world, like just saying, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. And they are, and it's amazing. And those people, it's amazing. And if those stories could make it back here, more of those stories, you're hearing like a lot of what's behind everything I do. Because I've heard those stories, and those people don't think that they exist. Those people don't think anybody knows they're there. And I know they're there, and now you know they're there, and you probably already knew they were there before I spoke. But wouldn't it be cool if there were like pictures all on these walls of women like that, or whatever, wherever there's corporate art, that's so, yeah. I have some other visions, but, step by step. Yeah, yes?
Actually kind of already answered when you said you wanted to avoid bringing back too much of the hopelessness kind of stories. Are there other mistakes that you see that might derail your efforts that you're trying to avoid?
Mistakes that I'm not totally sure I got you. Mistakes I've made, or?
Come from that angle, or are there things that can you talk about the risks to the success of it?
Well, I think because the project ideas are created in advance, and I work with the NGO, and I tell the NGO in advance, look, if you want to work with us, and there's no reason why, there's absolutely no reason any of them would disagree with this because of what they're passionate about. We want to tell the stories of the things that you're doing that are successful. Even if you're making mistakes along the way, everybody makes mistakes along the way. We don't have any interest. So I think because there's this sort of pre-production that's done, I hope that eliminates that possibility to bring back a pathetic, sad, hopeless story. I'm not sure that answers your question, though. Maybe I don't really get it.
Or are there other kinds of mistakes that you're kind of afraid of and taking steps to manage?
Well, I think because my intentions are good, I'm not really afraid of my mistakes. I think a lot of my mistakes are really gifts, and I learn a lot from them, I'm pretty transparent. I showed you the drive-by shootings picture and all that. I'm not afraid to tell you all the mistakes I've made, because maybe that'll help you guys not make the same mistakes I made. And everything I learned from those mistakes got me to stand here today, and I know that my intentions are good. So I'm not really afraid of mistakes. I think I have to cover my bases as far as leading people in a foreign country. Everybody signs a release that essentially says I'm responsible for zero. That could be a big mistake. Even terrorist attack, even, everything, things just that I would never thought of, acts of nature, all that. And lucky enough to have people to share those release forms with me that lawyers have gone through and all that. And I don't know, I think it's hard to answer a question that's sort of a future question,
Well, I was just wondering, what are the kinds of things you worry about?
What do I worry about? I just worry that everybody's going to be okay on the trip. I just want to make sure everyone's going to be okay and feel safe and feel comfortable and feel productive, and that they feel like they're a part of what's happening. All of a sudden people don't go. When people travel, you guys have probably traveled. People change when they travel. They turn into different. A lot of them turn into little children, very little children. Where's the laptop? And it's just wow. And I'm I must do that too. But people get sick, and I have to deal with that. I feel like a mom kind of on these trips, which is fine. But I think that's number one is everybody's well-being on the trip. I'm not worried because I don't like to worry, because when I, going down that path never really helps the situation. I'm concerned. I have a huge concern for everybody's well-being. And that's that is my number one focus on these trips. Kind of unfortunately, right, because I'm this documentary photographer. But for now, I'm leading the trips and everybody's well-being. Not even so much did you have a great time, like their well-being is number one. But I try really hard to not worry and actually not use that word too much. I like the word concern. Because how's that? Cool. Got the thumbs up. All right. Anybody else? Yeah.
In terms of the geographical diversity you were talking about earlier, could you see ever doing a Salon Garage project here in the States?
A lot of people ask me, am I going to do something in the States? Absolutely. Yeah, I see that as a possibility. You know, it just so happens that I started doing my career internationally, so, well, the social documentary work. Yes. Next year, no. It's like I can, right now, 2-3 trips a year is like enough. I mean, it probably will change in 2010 because at the rate things are going. But yeah, because at the same time while I'm building all this stuff, I'm managing, I'm speaking a lot at all these different things, and you know, and then there's like a book, and then there's interviews and stuff. So there's actually a lot of managing the energy around it, which is another thing I hadn't expected. So, and I want to make sure that I do a good job all over the place. So yeah, I'm sure. I mean, a lot of people have asked me that. And a lot of organizations have already approached me. So it's in the file. And there's certainly plenty of stuff. There's plenty of stories in this country that can be told. I mean, they're everywhere. So. Anybody else? Okay.
I don't know if this is a silly question, but can you compare the mental approach to, I guess you call it social documentary photography with, just say, photojournalism? Different kinds of demands, different approaches to being one versus being the other.
The difference between, bless you, the difference between social documentary and photojournalism. That's a great question, and really I only have my own definition of that, my own distinction. And in my experience, I also shoot for New York Times, so that's photojournalism, right? And that, the only way I can help you, my only distinction is for my social documentary work, I spend a lot of time in one place doing a project. My photojournalism, I'm in and out of there pretty fast. I know the story, I read it, you know. I totally do not get that in depth. Probably no interviews, no video, you know, not like to the extent of Age is Knocking, let's say. So for me, it's just amount of time on the project. I'm sure somewhere there's a great definition. I don't even know what it is, but that's my distinction. That's a great question. This guy's giggling over here. Do you guys have any other questions? Yeah.
What if the NGO doesn't really like the content that it's creating? Or does that never happen?
Well, I've led one Salon Garage tour, and I've done all my own work. So if I combine all those experiences for your answer, it's not really up to them whether they like the content or not, actually, because they're not hiring us. And every NGO that I've ever worked with, in addition to my colleagues in my community, they're just so psyched, like Caxton said, that somebody is showing up and that somebody knows that they exist, that like the quality of the content doesn't matter. Like the fact that somebody is there, like that's never happened for them before. You know, somebody shows up and wants to hear their story. I mean, they're all like, they're literally in tears that you show up. I mean, so those kids in India send me, you should see the artwork. I need to include that, the drawings and the pictures that they gave us, you know, and they started calling me their big sister, and I mean, it's just like, you wouldn't believe, and it's exciting for them. It's fun, it's different, you know. And now with digital cameras, you can show them the picture on the back, and that's like, whoa, you'll never see gratitude like you will when you show a little kid his own picture. They've never seen a picture of themselves before. I mean, it's just, and if you can bring some little thing where you can print them out and, oh man. Or another great thing about working with the NGO is that you can actually get pictures to the kids. Whereas like what I did in India, I actually did get the address of some people and send a big package of pictures to India. I'll never know if they got those pictures. I'll never know. But here, a lot of NGOs have an address here in the States, right? Even if it's, like even Vatsalya is an Indian-based NGO, but they have like a connection to the U.S. so that you can deal with, bank deposits and stuff like that and mail. So images and gifts or whatever it is will get to those kids. Like it will, which is really cool. And the question of is the content good enough? I think the only person that's really concerned about that is the content creator. That's what's running through their head, their own insecurities, because everybody else is just, it's a big party. It's fun, it's fun for those guys, so, yeah. Yep.
When you say NGOs and hire you, so basically you kind of like, here's a bunch of photographers, use them?
No, well, I work with them in advance, and then we come up with the story ideas way in advance. Then we show up, we have meetings, here's the staff, intros, yada, 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 break off into groups. And I tell them to do what I did in Brazil, like don't take pictures right away, like walk around. Like I'm actually like grateful for all my mistakes because it makes their job easier, and they have a more positive impact on the community there, right? So then they show up, they meet people, they might meet the kids. In India, we're going to be doing some one-on-one with kids. We use different names, but and there'll be translators and people around and everything will be fine. But they know they're coming and, we just say, there you go. I mean, under that structure,
Some people are volunteering their time. The photographers are volunteering their time for it.
Yeah. It's kind of like voluntourism, but not really, kind of. But they also, one thing that's really important that everybody knows is that every tourist, every traveler, I call them, has to commit to disseminating that content when they come home. So that lives on. They have got to do that, and we come up with that plan before we leave the country, whatever country we go to. So, for example, India, we don't leave India until everybody has a plan, make an outline, come up with a couple deadlines, make it real, like put stuff down on paper, on a computer, whatever it is, and do it. And if it's just Facebook, and if it's, not just, but if it's a Facebook page or a Flickr, or upload them to the Salam Garage and be part of the Salam Garage Flickr group, or something, like a photo exhibition that travels, a presentation at your church is a big one, presentation like this, they have to do that because it would just break my heart knowing that all that work went into it and all those kids gave everything they gave and nothing happened with that. So that's part of it. You had a question?
So which do you feel is more important, or does it not matter between those three aspects of the people having someone taking note of them, you having a new viewpoint, and then the spiraling aspect of them telling the story?
Me having a new viewpoint? That one I don't get.
Well, for the folks who are experiencing this for the first time, you just said plan for yourself coming back,
okay.
Disseminating the ideas and how it changes your viewpoint on the world, having seen these experiences.
Changing my viewpoint on the world based on their content sharing? I'm not getting that.
Interacting with them, seeing the way they live, like now.
Oh, you meaning a traveler, not me, Amanda, but me being a traveler on a Salam Garage trip. Okay, got it.
The people you interact with, yourself, and then the social interactions once you come back.
What do I think is most important? Oh, it's really hard to prioritize that. I think they all work one with each other. Yeah. Sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
About the people who were on your first tour, where they are now in terms of photography. Are they still working with you, or have they started their own?
Well, Conrad Chavez, who was the only male that went, the one who made the blog, when I told you he made the pretty extensive website. He is already a professional photographer, and he's the one that writes Photoshop books. So he's, chugging along with his own career. Another woman, Cynthia LaRue, she went and, unfortunately, she was no longer, she came home and her job was no longer, but then at the same time, she took all these photography classes. So she went to a photography class in town and took a lot of classes. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Linda Steen is another woman who, I'm not saying this is a result of the trip, but I know that she sold her business. She was in a business, so she didn't feel like being in anymore, and she sold that. And she presented at another, we all presented a Salam Garage presentation at one point, I don't know, a few months ago, whatever, January, February, who knows. And what she said was, and I'm not going to get it right, was that she wanted to do a complete career change and sell her business, get out of her business, and go back to school and learn something about teaching life skills to people, like practical life skills to people. You were there. Was that roughly what she said she would do, in tears?
I don't remember exactly what she said that day either, but that particular participant wanted to make a big change. She owned a small business and wanted to go and do something completely different, and she's been aiming for things that touch people a lot more.
Yeah, and I know she just sold the business, and then Danielle, the one in D.C., she went up to the Indian Embassy, and now they're working on hanging their work in the Indian Embassy, got involved with Shy, and now she's became part of this NGO, created this subsidiary or something like that of an NGO in D.C., went on to work full-time at National Geographic, and not as a photographer. She was already there doing research, but then she was lucky enough to get a full-time job versus this part-time job and dive fully into photography, documentary photography, and work with this NGO and the embassy to get her work out there. So that's what the 4 participants have done. And I would imagine that anyone that would go on this kind of trip would be in this particular situation in their life where it's not that they're ready to change their whole life, but they're ready to take something to the next level, whatever that something is for them.
How do you pick who goes?
Oh, well, I don't really pick, right, because they're paying, so. No, but I think the choosing and the picking is going to start because I see the trip starting to get funded. So I think what's going to happen is, it hasn't happened. Thanks for coming. Bye. I think what's going to happen is the trips are going to get funded, and there'll be an application process where people will actually come up with a project and a plan for what they'll do with their project. And I'll take a look at that and see what seems realistic and seems what they might actually, people will actually do. I mean, definitely not going to be choosing people. I don't want to do a portfolio thing. I want to do more like a plan, And I also, something that's happening is now people are donating for scholarships for people to go on Salam Garage trips, because I was one of those kids that couldn't afford to go on these kinds of trips when I was younger. And so I was just interviewed by somebody, and he's like, well, I don't really want, on camera, I don't really want to go on a trip, but I want to create the scholarship. So there came the idea of scholarships on camera during the interview. And so now there's this, scholarship fund. So, and that'll obviously be an application process, and which would be that's a whole new world for me. I mean, but.
You talked about spending time there. What is the length that you did for this trip, and what do you see as kind of the ideal door-to-door length for one of these trips?
Okay. That was 10 days, which wasn't long enough. India this year is going to be 12 days in country. And so door-to-door is up to the individuals. I know that some people, since they're already flying to India, some people, a lot of flights go through Amsterdam and London, so people did their own trips there since they already, committed to the trip. I just focused with the in-country, and the in-country is 12 days, both in Guatemala. It'll be 12 days in Guatemala. It is 12 days in Guatemala and India, and it will be 12 days in Vietnam, and we'll see how that goes.
And since you're working with the organization, you tend to set up like one local base of operations, or are you moving around during that period of time? Or?
When we work with when we're doing the NGO part of the tour, because the other part is just a little travel around, we are centrally located and we stay in one place and we keep going back to that place and back to that place, and we stay there. That's really important. I think moving around while you're doing a project with your gear is too haphazard. So we have a home base, we go out to the NGO, we come back. And it's going to be different in every place. Like in India, we stay in a hotel in Jaipur, and then we go to Udayan, which is about 45 minutes outside of the city, which is where the NGO is. But some of the projects are going to be inside Jaipur because we're going to go with a bus that actually rescues children. So, that part, it depends on the project, but we have a central location. And in Guatemala, we're actually going to stay in the villages because that's the only place we can stay, and then use an online internet cafe and stuff like that. So it depends, but yeah, home base.
So do you have, basically it's a follow-up question for my previous question. So the people who are on your first trip, basically the trip also made a big impact on the photographer as well, other than. So do you expect other from the future trip, because do you expect the same kind of outcome for the photographers who go with you, or do you actually do you see what I mean?
Do I expect the same impact that the photographers will have on these trips that I've had?
Do you expect the same impact, the outcome for the photographer? Because it's different from the travel workshop. People just go there and take a picture of a beautiful city. It's a little bit different.
Very different.
So you're also expect different from the people who go with you, right?
I expect, like I said, people commit to the project and doing something with the project. So there's a difference already.
So when you say that, when you ask them to commit on it, you also have an expectation on outcomes.
I don't necessarily have an expectation on the outcome of the project, but I have an expectation that they will commit to disseminating the content. I don't expect the show to not touch the ground for a year like this past one. First of all, I don't expect that because I didn't expect that at first. I like to have high expectations for myself, but I'm careful to have expectations for others. So I don't have an expectation for the outcome of their commitment to their project. But I would imagine they would, I'm sure they would have self-imposed expectations, sure. Everybody does. Because I don't want them to fail. I don't want them to feel like they're going to fail, I don't want them to feel that, well, it has to be this big show and I have to sell all these pictures and raise all this money for Vatsai, I think it's dangerous to have unrealistic expectations to start with. So I think everybody will know in their own world what's a real expectation, and we'll talk about that on the trip. Who's your community? What can you tap into? Everybody's different, So I think it's really going to be different. I think the outcome will be different for everybody, and everybody will have their own expectations, and I try to steer clear of having expectations of them for the outcome. Is that there? Okay. Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming. Thanks a lot. And I don't know if anybody's interested in the books because I can sign them and I brought them here or not. Just let me know afterwards. And like I said, there's stuff in the back that you can pick up, and you can always email me at salamgarage@gmail.com. And that's that. Thanks for coming. Thank you.